Does screenplay convention confuse you as much as astrophysics? How's it? Chop Screenplay Prep. And this week we're talking about screenplay convention. What on earth is screenplay convention? Convention is something that is an agreed upon standard. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that within the film industry, when it comes to writing, there is no central authority that commands everyone else as to what the convention is. So let's get to basics. What is a film? A film is scenes of action and actors acting and presenting dialogue. So essentially you have action and dialogue. These need representing such that the film crew can put a film together. So a screenplay, therefore, needs to represent what we see in form of action and then what we hear from the characters in the form of dialogue. Now, when it comes to putting this on paper, there are some extra elements that signpost the elements of action and dialogue. So we have things like scene headings. We then have action description blocks. We then have the dialogue element. We then have transitional elements. Elements are what make up the screenplay. And the screenplay follows a loose form of a convention. Now, going way back, there was some degree of convention, but it was never ratified and shaken hands upon between all the studios, such that you screenwriters can go to the Golden Book and know that you're reading off the sacred instruction set as to how to produce your screenplay. However, through word of mouth and experience and time, many of these ideas and conventions and expected formats are pretty obvious, and people follow them whether they're reading through one of the screenplay Bibles or whether they're looking at movie scripts or hearing about it at film school. However, within the intricacy of the format of a screenplay, there are certain elements that are not agreed upon in terms of you do it this way as opposed to this way, or you could even do it this way. So there are multiple approaches to certain aspects of screenwriting. Something like a phone conversation is a typical one. How you lay that out and signpost it within your writing. The problem comes to be because there is no convention for everybody to follow and be the same in their presentation, is that when it comes to a Hollywood reader who might take a stack of 20 screenplays home for the weekend, and there they are stacked up on the side table waiting for that Sunday, that if all 20 follow different ideas as to how to present a phone conversation, the reader then gets a little confused. You want a degree of conformity, consistency with efficient writing, so such that the reader doesn't struggle to work out, oh, it is a phone conversation, and that it is, oh, right, so we are going to be seeing both sides. Because you could read something and be unsure as to you just seeing the person who started the call or the person receiving the call. And as the writer, you may not want to reveal the other person on the other side, or may not even want to hear them. So there are different ways to put that down on paper. So back to this idea of convention. It's obviously an important thing, but at the same time, I fear that a lot of people overly worry and get their knickers in a twist when they perhaps don't have to. Yes, it would be wonderful if the movie studios around the world across the different countries could agree upon some standards, but I don't think that's going to happen. It's as much as the tech companies agreeing to use the same sockets and cables. Whilst convention has some general expectations, there are a lot of things that over time have changed. Great example, top of the screenplay, fade in, was always there at the beginning of screenplays of days of old. fade in effectively was like the iris in. So the blades of the camera, the aperture opens up and the light comes in through the lens and lights up the screen, and the action starts, essentially. So fade in signifies the start of your screenplay. But over time, and I would say in the last 5-10 years, people have begun to think, well, it's obvious, we're at page 1. It's going to be a fade in. So it's seen as an unnecessary extra. And the key thing, in my view, is that it would be pretty poor for anyone to penalize your screenplay because you did or didn't type in fade in at the top of your screenplay. So I don't believe it's something that really matters. But where I see that it is useful to not use it is if you are worrying about page real estate. You're hitting that 120 page mark, so anything you can cut out is useful to save that space. So removing fade in at the top of page 1 could be a useful extra. But I think as time goes by, more and more screenplays are coming through without fade in at the top. So it might become more of an expectation. So this is where convention is a little unsure for the end user, essentially, because who's established that we're all agreeing upon it? It's almost cadence, where people just go with the flow, and suddenly it's the year 2030 and we realize that everyone's dumped fade in at the beginning of their screenplay. As technology changes, how do things like Skype calls and text messages get evoked in a screenplay? Those kind of things might change, particularly as the technology changes. So there is flexibility. So what matters then? It's really that within your 120 pages, let's say, that you've kept consistent, that you don't do something in the first act on page 12 with how a text message gets evoked, and then halfway through the screenplay, you've decided to write it out in a very different way. Because when the reader gets to that second occurrence of what seems to be a text message conversation, they'll be confused because it would have been presented differently before. So the reader will be thinking, oh, is this different? Have I misinterpreted this? Is this something else? So consistency is paramount. And then keeping it efficient. You don't add in too much information that then might confuse as to what you're trying to say. So whilst there's a degree of convention as to how to discern a flashback, a dream sequence, a phone conversation, I think it's more important to be worrying about efficiency, consistency, and clarity. As long as it's clear, as long as a reader doesn't have to guess what you really mean and what the camera needs to show. You know, the director needs to know who to call on set. He needs to know what to tell the cameraman to capture. What do we see? So what does the audience see on screen? Your words in your action description and with any shot headings need to declare that. It's as simple as that. So I'm barking on about convention whilst giving a degree of flexibility. And I think the idea here really is just to put your mind at rest, that if you are a little unsure, just go through your screenplay and look to see, is it clear and is it consistent and efficient? And I think then, you're on the money. If in doubt, you simply come to a screenplay service and ask them to check it through for you. And that'll then be part of a screenplay formatting run and the editor would go through and hopefully pick up on your flashbacks, dream sequences, phone conversations, car chases, whatever they might be, and just check that they are clear and adhere to general screenplay formatting conventions. I hope that was very useful to you and put your mind at rest, and I shall see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.